Picture this. You're scrolling through your phone on a Friday night. Your feed is full of group photos, crowded parties, people tagging their squad. And you? You're home, alone, maybe with a book, a show, or just your thoughts. And here's the thing. You're not miserable about it. Maybe a little curious why everyone else seems to need a crowd to feel alive. If that sounds familiar, you might be part of a rare personality type that the world constantly misunderstands. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on why some people drift through life with few or no friends. Not because they're broken, but because they're wired differently. Stick around, because what you're about to learn might just reframe everything. Let's start with the most misunderstood profile, the schizoid personality. Now, before you panic at the clinical-sounding name, hear me out. This isn't about mental illness or dysfunction. It's about a deeply introverted temperament that genuinely doesn't crave human connection the way most people do. Imagine someone who walks through life like they're observing it from behind glass. They see the world, they understand it, but they don't feel the pull to dive in. Social gatherings don't excite them. They don't fantasize about romance or long for a best friend. It's not that they're afraid or hurt. They simply don't have that internal hunger for closeness. Picture this. It's someone's birthday party. Everyone's huddled together, laughing, sharing stories, taking selfies. And there's this one person in the corner, completely content, maybe looking at the bookshelf or petting the cat. They're not anxious, they're not pretending. They genuinely prefer their inner world to the chaos of social theater. Psychologists describe schizoid individuals as having a rich internal life, vivid imaginations, deep thoughts, creative pursuits, but little interest in translating that into relationships. They might have one or two acquaintances, but even those connections are surface level. And here's the twist. They're okay with it. Society tells us we need friends to be happy, to be normal. But for the schizoid temperament, solitude isn't loneliness. It's home. But maybe nothing's wrong. Maybe you're just wired for autonomy in a world obsessed with connection. Then there's the highly sensitive person, the HSP. This one's different. HSPs don't avoid people because they don't care. They avoid people because they care too much. They feel everything, the tension in a room, the subtle shift in someone's tone, the unspoken disappointment behind a forced smile. Imagine having the emotional equivalent of surround sound playing in your head at all times. Every interaction is layered, textured, overwhelming. So friendships? They're exhausting. Here's what it looks like. An HSP goes to a casual dinner with coworkers. On the surface, it's fine, but underneath, they're processing everything. Who interrupted whom? Who seemed hurt by a joke? The server's tired eyes? By the time they get home, they're drained. Not because they didn't enjoy it, but because their nervous system can't filter out the noise. Over time, they start declining invitations. Not out of disinterest, but out of self-preservation. They realize that most people don't operate at their frequency. Most people can laugh off a comment, move on from a weird vibe, shake off a crowded room. HSPs can't. They absorb it all, and so they retreat. They curate their lives to minimize overwhelm. Maybe they have one close friend who understands their need for depth and quiet. Maybe they don't even have that. What matters is that they've learned to protect their energy, even if it means being alone. If this is you, you've probably been called too sensitive your whole life. But sensitivity isn't weakness. It's a different operating system, one that doesn't mesh well with the shallow, overstimulating pace of most social dynamics. Another profile that flies under the radar, the avoidant attachment style. This one's rooted in early experiences. Maybe you grew up in a household where emotions were unpredictable or where closeness came with strings attached. Maybe you learned that vulnerability gets punished, that needing people is dangerous. So you adapted. You taught yourself to be self-sufficient, to not need anyone. Now, as an adult, you genuinely believe you're better off alone. Picture someone who's been invited to a friend's wedding. They decline, not because they dislike the friend, but because weddings are intimate, emotional, vulnerable. And vulnerability feels like exposure. Avoidantly attached people keep others at arm's length, not consciously, not cruelly, but instinctively. They don't pursue friendships because deep down, they expect those friendships to disappoint or demand too much. It's safer to stay on the perimeter, to be pleasant but distant, to never let anyone close enough to hurt them. The tricky part? This feels like a choice. Avoidant types often rationalize their isolation. I don't need people. I'm just independent. And on the surface, that's true, but underneath there's often unprocessed fear, a belief that connection equals loss of control or inevitable pain. If this resonates, you might find yourself oscillating, craving closeness in rare moments, then pulling away the second someone gets too near. It's not that you don't want friends, it's that you don't trust the process of friendship. And then there's the intellectually gifted loner. High IQ, divergent thinking, a mind that moves faster and stranger than most. These are the people who were called weird as kids, who never quite fit the social script, who realized early on that their interest in humor didn't match their peers, so they stopped trying. Not out of arrogance, but out of exhaustion. Imagine being fascinated by quantum mechanics or medieval philosophy or obscure film theory and trying to make small talk at a party about sports or celebrity gossip. It doesn't compute. Gifted individuals often report feeling like they're speaking a different language. They crave depth, nuance, complexity. But most social interactions are built on shared assumptions and common ground. When you don't share that ground, you're left on the outside. Over time, intellectually atypical people learn to be alone. They find community in books, ideas, online forums with strangers who get it, but in-person friendships? Rare. And here's the kicker. Society tells us that intelligence and social skill should go hand in hand, but they don't. You can be brilliant and socially awkward. You can be insightful and still have no idea how to navigate a group lunch. If this is your world, you've probably made peace with it. You've accepted that your circle will be small, maybe non-existent, and that your real connections happen in the realm of ideas, not people. Finally, let's talk about the person who's been burned too many times. The one who used to have friends, used to be social, but something happened. Maybe a betrayal. Maybe a series of shallow, draining relationships that left them empty. Maybe they realized that most friendships were transactional. People who only called when they needed something, so they withdrew. Not because they're antisocial, but because they're disillusioned. Picture someone who's tried, who's shown up, been vulnerable, invested time and energy only to be ghosted, excluded, or taken for granted. After enough of that, the cost-benefit analysis shifts. Why keep putting yourself out there when the return is disappointment? These people aren't cold. They're cautious. They're protecting what's left of their trust. And in a world where friendships are often performative, curated for Instagram, sustained by obligation, they've opted out. If this is you, you're not broken. You're discerning. You've just raised your standards to a level most people can't meet. So where does that leave you? If you're sitting here, nodding along, recognizing pieces of yourself in these profiles, what now? First, let go of the narrative that having no friends means something's wrong with you. Maybe you're schizoid and genuinely content in solitude. Maybe you're an HSP who needs space to recharge. Maybe you're avoidant and still learning to trust. Maybe you're intellectually wired differently. Maybe you've just been hurt. All of these are valid. All of these are human. Second, ask yourself, am I lonely or am I just different? There's a massive difference. Loneliness is painful. It's the ache of wanting connection and not having it. But solitude can be peaceful, creative, restorative. If you're genuinely happy alone, own it. Stop apologizing for it. Stop trying to fit a mold that was never designed for you. But if you do feel lonely, if part of you craves connection but doesn't know how to build it, start small. One person, one conversation, not a crowd, not a performance, just something real. Find people who match your frequency. Online communities, niche interest groups, creative collaborations. Connection doesn't have to look like everyone else's version. So, which profile fits you? Are you the observer behind the glass, the sensitive soul, the cautious heart, the divergent thinker, or the disillusioned realist? Drop a comment and let me know. And if this resonated, share it with someone who might need to hear it. Because the world needs to understand. Being alone doesn't always mean being lonely. Sometimes it just means being yourself.